Imagine building an empire only to realize the foundation was the person you threw away. 7 years ago, Liam Sterling evicted his wife, Amanda, for an affair she didn't commit. He gave her 20 minutes to pack. He thought he was cutting out a cancer. He was wrong. He was cutting out his heart and his brain. Today, a ghost company called Stratosphere is destroying his legacy, piece by piece. The CEO, the woman who left with a single suitcase. She didn't get mad. She got even. And now she owns his biggest rival. Welcome to the most brutal corporate revenge story you will ever hear. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker, harder to hold onto. That was how Liam Sterling felt looking at his wife, Amanda. She was standing in the foyer of their minimalist, overly expensive Bellevue home, a single, battered Samsonite suitcase by her side. It was the same suitcase she'd brought into the marriage 5 years ago. "Is that it?" Liam asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was cold, detached. It was the voice he used when firing a junior developer who hadn't met a deadline. "You're not going to deny it. You're not going to beg." Amanda looked at him. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel that Liam used to say grounded him, were dull, like muddy water. She wore a simple beige trench coat, belted tightly at the waist. She looked smaller than he remembered, fragile almost. "Would it matter, Liam?" she asked softly. "The pictures were pretty clear, Amanda," Liam snapped, his composure cracking for a microsecond. He gestured to the envelope on the marble console table. "Grainy photos. Amanda at a hotel bar with a man. Amanda laughing. Amanda's hand on the man's arm. The man was distinctive, older, with silver hair and a tailored suit. It looked like intimacy. To Liam, a man who dealt in binary code and absolute truths, it was intimacy. He didn't know the man's. He didn't care to know. He just knew that while he was pulling 80-hour weeks, trying to get Sterling systems off the ground, his wife was out. "It's not what you think," she said, but the fight had already left her voice. She had tried to explain an hour ago. She had tried to say it was a meeting, an investment pitch she was making on his behalf because the bank had rejected his loan application again. But Liam, blinded by stress and the arrogance of a man who believed he was the sole architect of his destiny, hadn't listened. He had called her a liar. He had told her to get out. "Take whatever you want," Liam said, turning his back to her to pour a scotch. "The car. The jewelry. I don't care. Just sign the papers when my lawyer sends them. I don't want the car, Liam." "And?" I left the ring on the nightstand. The silence that followed was heavy. Liam took a sip of the amber liquid, expecting her to start shouting, to throw a vase, to demand half of the company he hadn't even fully built yet. That's what people did in divorces, right? They clawed at each other. Instead, he heard the click of the latch. Then the soft squeak of the suitcase wheels on the hardwood. And finally, the heavy thud click of the front door closing. He turned around. The foyer was empty. She was gone. 7 years later, stock price is down another 4%, Liam. The board is getting twitchy. Liam Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office on the 45th floor. Seattle looked different from up here. It looked like a circuit board he controlled. But lately, the circuits were glitching. "It's Project Aegis," Liam muttered, not turning away from the view. "Tell me we have a leak." "We don't have a leak, Liam," said Greg, his COO and oldest friend. Greg sat on the leather sofa, looking exhausted. "We have a competitor who is simply faster. Better. Stratosphere Inc. launched their quantum encryption key this morning, 2 weeks before our scheduled release." Again, Liam spun around, his jaw tight. Stratosphere. Again, for the last 2 years, Stratosphere Inc. had been the ghost in the machine. No one knew where they came from. They had popped up out of nowhere, headquartered in San Francisco, but with a massive, silent presence in the global market. They didn't do press releases. Their CEO didn't do TED Talks. They just released products that made Sterling Systems look like they were selling abacuses. "Who is running that place, Greg?" Liam slammed his hand on the mahogany desk. "I want a name." "I wanted a name 2 years ago, and I still don't have one. It's a holding company maze," Greg said, rubbing his temples. "Registered in Delaware, subsidiaries in Singapore and Dublin. The CEO is listed as a JSP Holdings. No face. No interviews. Just results. They're anticipating our moves." Liam paced the room. "They knew about the encryption key. They knew about the government contract in DC last month. They underbid us by exactly 1%. That's not business, Greg. That's personal. Someone is inside this building. We've swept the bugs. We've audited the staff. Liam, maybe they're just smarter than us." Liam stopped pacing. He looked at a framed photo on his shelf. It wasn't of family, he didn't have any left. It was him, alone, cutting the ribbon on this building 5 years ago. He had achieved everything he wanted. He was worth $3 billion. He was the king of tech on the cover of Forbes. And he had never been more miserable. Every time he went home to his penthouse, the silence was deafening. He dated models, actresses, even a minor royal once. But they were all noise. Static. None of them knew how he liked his coffee, black, 2 cubes of ice to cool it immediately. None of them knew that he had panic attacks when it thundered. Amanda knew. The thought of her was an intrusive virus he couldn't purge. He hadn't seen her in 7 years. He had sent the divorce papers. She had signed them and returned them by mail. No note. No demand for alimony. She had vanished into the ether. "I'm going to the gala tonight," Liam said suddenly. Greg looked up, surprised. "The Tech Innovators Ball. You hate that thing. You called it a petting zoo for narcissists last year. Stratosphere is receiving the Disruptor of the Year award," Liam said, straightening his tie. His eyes were cold again, the hunter locking onto prey. Whoever runs it has to show up to accept the award. I'm going to look them in the eye and find out how they're stealing my life. The Tech Innovators Ball was held at the Museum of Pop Culture. It was a sea of tuxedos, sequins, and the smell of desperate networking. Liam moved through the crowd like a shark, ignoring the hands thrust out for him to shake. He was focused on the stage. And now the announcer boomed, his voice echoing through the hall, the award for Disruptor of the Year. Please welcome the founder of Stratosphere Inc. Ms. Amanda Jenkins. Liam froze. The champagne glass in his hand shattered, slicing his palm. He didn't feel it. The applause was polite, curious. The room went dark, and a spotlight hit the stage. From the curtains, a woman walked out. She wasn't wearing a beige trench coat. She was wearing a midnight blue gown that looked like it was woven from starlight. It hugged a figure that was confident, strong. Her hair, once usually tied back in a messy bun, cascaded in loose, glossy waves over her shoulders. But it was the face. The same hazel eyes. The same curve of the jaw. But the expression, it wasn't the muddy, defeated look he remembered. It was fierce. It was radiant. It was Amanda. Liam felt the blood drain from his face. He felt like the floor had opened up and swallowed him whole. Amanda. His Amanda. The woman who liked to knit and bake sourdough bread. The woman he had kicked out for cheating. She walked to the microphone. She didn't look nervous. She looked regal. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was deeper, richer than he remembered. It commanded the room. When I started Stratosphere 7 years ago, I didn't have much. I had a suitcase, a broken heart, and a very specific motivation. The crowd laughed politely. Liam didn't breathe. I learned the hard way, she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. For a second, just a split second, Liam thought her. Gaze locked onto his. It felt like a physical blow. I learned that sometimes you have to be dismantled to build yourself back up. Stratosphere isn't just about technology. It's about seeing the value in things that others discard. She smiled, and it was a smile that could cut glass. And we're just getting started. As she walked off the stage, the room erupted. Liam stood paralyzed, blood dripping from his hand onto the expensive carpet. Greg appeared at his elbow, looking pale. Liam. Tell me that wasn't. Isn't that my ex-wife, Liam whispered. The realization hit him like a freight train. JSB Holdings. Jenkins. Amanda. P. What did the P stand for? He didn't know. But he was going to find out. He pushed past Greg, ignoring the bloody hand, and headed for the backstage entrance. He wasn't the king of tech anymore. He was a man who had just realized he'd been fighting a war against a ghost, and the ghost just walked into the room carrying a nuclear weapon. He reached the VIP corridor just as Amanda was handing the award to an assistant. She turned as she heard his footsteps. She didn't look surprised to see him. "Hello, Liam," she said. Her voice was cool, smooth. "You're bleeding, Amanda," he choked out. "Are you? You own Stratosphere. I founded it. I own it. I run it," she corrected him. She took a step closer, and the scent of her perfume, jasmine and rain, hit him. It was the same scent. It was the only thing about her that hadn't changed. "But, how you were a teacher. You didn't know code. You didn't know business. I was a math teacher, Liam." "Logic is universal," she said, tilting her head. "And as for business, I lived with you for 5 years. I listened. I learned. I saw every mistake you made, every person you alienated, every corner you cut. I just built a company that didn't make those mistakes. You stole my encryption keys," he accused, falling back on anger because the grief was too much. "I didn't steal anything," she said calmly. "I improved them. There's a difference. You were always too arrogant to see the flaws in your own architecture, Liam. In your code. And in your marriage." She turned to leave. "Wait," Liam grabbed her arm. It was an instinct. 2 massive security guards stepped out of the shadows instantly, but Amanda held up a hand to stop them. She looked down at Liam's hand on her arm, then up at his eyes. "Let go, Liam. The man," Liam stammered. "The man in the photos. Who was he? Was he the one who funded this? Did you leave me for him?" Amanda laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You really still don't get it, do you?" She leaned in close, her voice a whisper that screamed. "That man wasn't my lover, Liam. That was Arthur Penhaligon." Liam's knees almost gave out. "Arthur Penhaligon. The venture capitalist legend. The man known as the Godfather of Silicon Valley. The man Liam had been trying to get a meeting with for a decade and never succeeded. He was the only one who listened to my pitch about a new compression algorithm I'd been working on in my spare time," Amanda said. "I was pitching to him for you, Liam. I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to save your company." She pulled her arm free. "But you threw me out before I could tell you. So Mr. Penhaligon invested in me instead." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "See you in the marketplace, Liam." Try to keep up. The drive back to the Sterling Systems headquarters was a blur of neon lights and rain. Liam didn't go home. He couldn't. The penthouse felt like a mausoleum. He needed the sterile, cold comfort of his server room. "Get me everything on Arthur Penhaligon," Liam barked into his phone, storming through the glass doors of his building at 2:00 a.m. The night security guard jumped, spilling coffee on his uniform. "And get me everything on Amanda Jenkins. I want tax returns. I want travel logs. I want to know what brand of toothpaste she uses." Greg, his COO, was already in the conference room, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "Liam, you can't just investigate a competitor like this. It's corporate espionage," Greg warned, pulling up data on the massive screen. "She's not a competitor, Greg. She's my wife, ex-wife," Greg corrected gently. "And she's the CEO of a company valued at $4 billion. Stratosphere just closed the Nasdaq down 3 points because of their announcement tonight. The market loves her." Liam stared at the screen. A photo of Amanda from the gala was already trending on Twitter. "The Queen returns" was the hashtag. "She looked powerful. Untouchable." "How?" Liam whispered, sinking into a chair. "She was a math teacher, Greg. She graded papers on our kitchen table. She didn't know C++. She didn't know Python." Greg hesitated, then tapped a key. A file opened. It was an old archived folder from the Sterling Systems internal server, dated 7 years ago, 2 months before the divorce. "I did some digging while you were driving back," Greg said softly. "Look at the commit logs for the original Sterling 1 operating system." Liam squinted at the code. It was the kernel, the very heart of the software that had made him a billionaire. He knew every line. He had written it. "What am I looking at?" "Look at the timestamps, Liam. You were sleeping at the office during the crunch time, remember? But the code commits. They were happening from your home IP address. Between 1:00 a.m. and 4:00 a.m. Liam felt a cold shiver crawl up his spine. "I was working remotely." "No," Greg said. "You weren't. You were passed out on the couch in the break room. I have the security footage." Liam looked at the code again. It was elegant. Efficient. It fixed a memory lake that had plagued him for weeks, a bug he thought he had miraculously solved in his sleep. "She fixed it," Liam whispered. The realization hit him harder than the divorce papers ever had. "She was fixing my code while I slept. She was optimizing the algorithms while I was screaming at her for not understanding my stress. She wasn't just a math teacher, Liam," Greg said, his voice heavy with pity. "She was a genius. And you treated her like furniture." Liam stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. The shame was burning him, but the anger was hotter. She had lied to him. By omission, maybe, but it was still a lie. She had let him believe he was the sole genius. "If she's this good," Liam said, his eyes narrowing, "then she's a threat. A real threat. She knows my architecture better than I do. What are you going to do? She wants a war." Liam grabbed his coat. "I'll give her a war. Call the legal team. We are going to sue Stratosphere for intellectual property theft. If she wrote that code for Sterling Systems while we were married, it belongs to me. She can't build a rival company on my foundation. Liam, that's a dangerous play. If you claim she wrote the code, you admit you didn't. I don't care about the credit anymore, Greg," Liam snarled, walking out the door. "I care about survival. I'm going to bury her." The cease and desist letter was delivered to Amanda's office the next morning. It was aggressive, citing inevitable disclosure and misappropriation of trade secrets. Amanda read it while sipping matcha tea in her office overlooking the San Francisco Bay. She didn't look worried. She looked bored. "He's predictable," Arthur Penhaligon said from the armchair across from her. At 70 years old, Arthur was a lion of industry, with a mane of white hair and eyes that missed nothing. "He attacks when he's frightened. He thinks he can bully me," Amanda said, tossing the letter onto her desk. "He forgets that I spent 5 years learning how to handle a bully. You just have to be smarter. The Department of Defense contract bid is in 3 days," Arthur reminded her. "Project Ironclad. It's worth $10 billion. If Sterling gets it, he stays afloat. If we get it, he's finished." "He won't get it," Amanda said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "Because his encryption has a backdoor. I found it 7 years ago. I patched it in my version, but he never did. He's too arrogant to audit his own work. You're going to expose it?" "No," Amanda smiled, a dangerous glint in her hazel eyes. "I'm going to let him expose himself." The meeting for Project Ironclad was held in a secure bunker outside D.C. The tension in the room was palpable. On one side of the long steel table sat Liam and his team of 20 lawyers and engineers. On the other side sat Amanda, Arthur, and a single assistant. General Hayes, a man with a jaw like an anvil, sat at the head. "We need a system that is unhackable," the general said. "Foreign adversaries are knocking at the door every second." "Mr. Sterling, you're up." Liam stood up, projecting confidence. He launched into a dazzling presentation about quantum resistance and firewall dynamics. He was charming, articulate, and forceful. He finished with a flourish. "Sterling Systems has never been breached," Liam declared. "Not once in 7 years." He sat down, smirking at Amanda. Amanda stood up. She didn't have a PowerPoint. She didn't have a team. She just placed a small black laptop on the table. "General," Amanda said softly, "Mr. Sterling is a brilliant salesman. But his system has a flaw. It's called the ego protocol." "Excuse me," Liam snapped. 7 years ago," Amanda continued, addressing the general but looking straight at Liam, "I found a redundancy in the base code of Sterling OS. It prioritizes speed over security during high-traffic surges. It's a shortcut." "A lazy one." "That's a lie," Liam shouted, standing up. "My code is perfect." "Is it?" Amanda typed a few commands into her laptop. "General, if you would check your phone." General Hayes looked down. His secure military phone buzzed. He stared at the screen, his face turning red. "It says, 'Hello, Amanda,'" the general read. The room went dead silent. "I just bypassed your firewall using the very flaw I warned you about 7 years ago, Liam," Amanda said, closing her laptop. "I didn't hack you. I just walked through the door you left open." She turned to the general. "Stratosphere doesn't have doors. We build walls. And we build them right." Liam stood frozen. His team was frantically typing, trying to figure out what had just happened. But it was too late. The humiliation was total. "Mr. Sterling," General Hayes said, his voice ice cold. Get your team out of here. We will be proceeding with Stratosphere. As Liam was escorted out by military police, he looked back at Amanda. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't smiling. She was just watching him, a sad resignation in her eyes. It was the look of a woman who had tried to save a man from himself, only to watch him jump off the cliff anyway. The loss of the defense contract tanked Sterling Systems' stock by 40% overnight. The board was calling for Liam's resignation. The media was calling it the ego crash. Liam was drinking alone in a bar in downtown Seattle, watching his life unravel on the TV. Above the counter, "You look like you could use a friend," a voice purred next to him. Liam turned to see a woman sliding onto the stool next to him. She was stunning, platinum blonde hair, red lips, expensive clothes. But her eyes were calculating. "I don't have friends," Liam muttered. "I have employees and enemies. I'm Chloe," she said, signaling the bartender for a martini. "And I think we have a common enemy." "Amanda Jenkins," Liam straightened up. "You know Amanda. I worked for her," Chloe lied smoothly. She hadn't worked for Amanda. She was a corporate fixer for a rival firm that had been crushed by Stratosphere last year. She was a mercenary. "She's not a saint, Liam. She has secrets." "Dirty ones. I'm listening. You think she built Stratosphere on goodwill and fairy dust?" Chloe laughed. "She ruthlessly cut out her partners. She stole designs. And there's something personal." Chloe leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The real reason she didn't fight you on the divorce. The reason she left so quietly." "Why?" Liam asked, his heart pounding. "Because she was already pregnant," Chloe whispered. Liam dropped his glass. It shattered, whiskey splashing onto his boots. "What? She lost the baby 3 months later," Chloe said, her face a mask of faux sympathy. "Stress. Poverty. Sleeping in a motel because her billionaire husband kicked her out without a dime. She blames you, Liam. That's why she's destroying you. It's not business. It's vengeance for the child she lost. It was a lie. A horrific, calculated lie designed to weaponize Liam's guilt and turn it into rage." Chloe didn't know if Amanda had been pregnant, but she knew how to manipulate a desperate man. Liam sat there, the room spinning. A child. He had killed his own child. No, that couldn't be true. Amanda would have told him. Would she? A voice in his head screamed. You didn't give her a chance to speak. You threw her out. A mixture of agonizing grief and white-hot fury exploded in his chest. If this was true, he deserved to die. But if she was using their dead child as motivation to ruin him, then he would burn the whole world down. Do you have proof? Liam asked, his voice shaking. I can get it, Chloe said, placing a hand on his arm. But we need to strike now. While she's celebrating the contract win. We need to hit her where she's vulnerable. Where is that? Her past, Chloe smiled. There's a reason she hides behind Arthur Penhaligon. We dig up the dirt on her time before she met you. We paint her as a fraud. We destroy her image and the stock price crashes. Then you buy her out for pennies. Liam looked at Chloe. He knew she was a viper. He knew this was dirty. But he was drowning, and she was offering him a lifeline made of barbed wire. "Do it," Liam said. "Find me something I can use." Across town, in her penthouse, Amanda sat on her balcony looking at the stars. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Arthur. "Liam is making moves. He's hired a fixer. A woman named Chloe." Amanda sighed and put the phone down. She wrapped her shawl tighter around herself. "He never learns," she whispered to the wind. "He always chooses the easy lie over the hard truth." She wasn't afraid of Chloe. She wasn't afraid of Liam. Because the secret she was keeping wasn't about a child. It was about him. It was the medical report she had received the week before he kicked her out. The report she had tried to show him that night, the one hidden in the envelope behind the photos of Arthur. Liam was sick. He had a genetic condition, a time bomb in his brain that caused paranoia, aggression, and eventually cognitive collapse. She hadn't been pitching Arthur for money for the company. She had been pitching him for funding for a research cure. She was building Stratosphere to save his life. And he was trying to destroy her for it. "Come on then, Liam," she said, tears finally spilling over. "Let's finish this." The smear campaign was surgical, brutal, and effective. Within a week, the headlines had shifted from Amanda Jenkins, the Queen of Tech, to Amanda Jenkins, the Black Widow of Silicon Valley. Chloe, the fixer, had done her job well. She leaked fabricated stories about Amanda stealing intellectual property from junior developers. She planted rumors about financial mismanagement. But the centerpiece of the attack was the personal narrative Liam had authorized, the story of a woman who abandoned her struggling husband after losing a pregnancy, only to return to destroy him when he became rich. It was a lie, but it was a lie that sold papers. Stratosphere's stock began to wobble. "You have to stop this, Liam," Greg pleaded. He was standing in Liam's office, watching his boss down another espresso. Liam looked manic. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands trembling, a symptom Greg assumed was caffeine, but was actually the ticking clock Amanda had warned about. "I'm winning, Greg," Liam snapped. For the first time in 7 years, she's on the defensive. She cancelled her keynote speech in London. "She's hiding, she's not hiding. She's refusing to engage in the gutter," Greg retorted. "And this lie about the baby. It's evil, Liam. Even for you, it's not a lie," Liam shouted, throwing his cup against the wall. It shattered, leaving a dark stain on the pristine paint. "Chloe told me. Amanda killed my child." Greg looked at the shattered ceramic, then at his oldest friend. He saw something in Liam's eyes that terrified him. It wasn't just anger, it was confusion. A fragmented, chaotic glare that didn't seem to recognize where he was for a second. "I'm resigning," Greg said quietly. "Good. Get out. I don't need cowards. I need soldiers." Greg left. Liam was alone. But not for long. His phone buzzed. It was an invitation. The Global Tech Summit. A panel discussion. The topic, ethics in AI. The panelists, Liam Sterling and Amanda Jenkins. She had accepted. She was coming to face him. The auditorium was packed. 3,000 people in the seats, millions watching online. The air crackled with tension. Liam sat on the stage, looking sharp in a charcoal suit, though his skin was pale and sweaty. Amanda sat opposite him. She wore white. It was a stark contrast to his darkness. She looked calm, almost serene, her hands folded in her lap. The moderator, a famous tech journalist, tried to keep control, but Liam wasn't interested in a debate. He was interested in a massacre. "Let's talk about ethics," Liam interrupted, leaning into his microphone. "Let's talk about the ethics of building a company on stolen code." "On the back of a husband you betrayed," the crowd gasped. The moderator tried to interject. "Mr. Sterling, let's keep this professional." "It is professional," Liam roared, standing up. He felt a strange buzzing in his ears, a pressure behind his eyes. "She's a fraud. She didn't write Stratosphere's code. She stole it from my bedside table while I was asleep. And when things got hard, she ran away." He pointed a shaking finger at her. "Tell them, Amanda. Tell them why you really left. Tell them about the baby you lost because you couldn't handle the pressure." The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. Amanda looked at him. She didn't look angry. She looked heartbroken. She reached for her microphone. "I didn't lose a baby, Liam," she said softly. Her voice was steady, amplifying through the massive speakers. "I was never pregnant." Liam froze. Chloe said. "Chloe is a liar you paid to validate your hate," Amanda said. She stood up slowly. "I didn't leave because I didn't love you. I left because you kicked me out. And I didn't fight you for the assets because I was trying to save something more important." "Save what?" Liam sneered, though his vision was starting to blur at the edges. "My money, your life," Amanda said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a file. It wasn't digital. It was paper. Yellowed, 7-year-old paper. 7 years ago, I noticed you were changing," Amanda said, addressing the audience now. "You were forgetting things. You were becoming paranoid. Aggressive. You thought it was stress. I thought it was burnout. So I took your genetic samples to a specialist, Dr. Aris Thorne." Liam stumbled back. Dr. Thorne was the leading neurologist in the country. "I got the results the day you kicked me out," Amanda continued, her voice trembling slightly. "You have early onset cerebrovascular degeneration. It's a genetic time bomb, Liam. It attacks the frontal lobe. It causes paranoia, rage, and eventually Total cognitive failure. Liar, Liam screamed, but his voice cracked. I built Stratosphere for one reason, Amanda said, tears streaming down her face. To fund the research for a cure. Every dollar I made, every contract I won, it went into the Sterling Initiative. My company exists to save you, Liam. Even when you were trying to destroy it, she opened the file and held up a chart. I found the cure, Liam. We entered FDA trials last month. I was coming to tell you tonight. The room spun. The faces in the crowd became a smear of color. The buzzing in Liam's ears became a roar. No, Liam whispered. You're the enemy. He looked at Amanda. Really looked at her. And for the first time in 7 years, the fog in his brain lifted just enough for him to see the truth. She wasn't holding a weapon. She was holding a lifeline. He had spent 7 years fighting the only person who was fighting for him. Amanda, he choked out. Then the floor rushed up to meet him. Darkness swallowed him whole. The beeping was annoying. A rhythmic, high-pitched chirp that drilled into Liam's skull. He opened his eyes. White ceiling. White walls. The smell of antiseptic and lilies. A hospital. He tried to sit up, but his body felt like lead. His head was heavy, wrapped in bandages. Careful, a voice said. Liam turned his head. Sitting in the chair next to the bed wasn't Amanda. It was Greg. Greg, Liam croaked. His throat felt like sandpaper. Are you? You quit. I did, Greg sighed, closing a magazine. But Amanda called me. She said you shouldn't wake up alone. Liam's memory crashed back into him. The stage. The shouting. The file. The collapse. Is it true? Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. The disease, Greg nodded solemnly. They did a scan when you were brought in. Your brain activity in the frontal cortex is erratic. It matches the diagnosis Amanda talked about. You had a minor stroke on stage, Liam. Brought on by the stress, Liam closed his eyes. The shame was a physical weight, heavier than the blankets. Where is she? She's in the hallway, Greg said. She's been there for 3 days. She hasn't slept. Does the world know everything? Greg said. The news cycle is complicated. Sterling Systems stock has plummeted. The board voted this morning, Liam. You're out. They invoked the incapacity clause in your contract. You're not the CEO anymore. Liam waited for the anger to come. The rage. The need to fight. But nothing came. Just a hollow, echoing silence. He had lost his company. He had lost his reputation. He had lost his fortune, most likely, as the lawsuits for defamation started rolling in. And Chloe, Liam asked. Gone, Greg snorted. The moment you hit the floor, she disappeared. Cleared out her hotel room. Amanda's lawyers are hunting her down for extortion, but she's a ghost. So I have nothing, Liam stated. You have a pulse, Greg said, standing up. And you have a wife, ex-wife, who is currently paying for this private room and the best neurosurgeons in the state. Greg walked to the door. I'll give you 2 a minute. Don't blow it, Liam. You don't have any chances left. Greg opened the door and Amanda walked in. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, reminiscent of the days before Stratosphere, before the billions. She wore jeans and a sweater. She didn't look like a CEO. She looked like Amanda. She approached the bed cautiously, as if approaching a wounded animal that might still bite. Hi, she whispered. Liam looked at her. He tried to find the words. I'm sorry seemed too small. Forgive me seemed too demanding. Why? Liam asked, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. After everything I did. I humiliated you. I accused you of murder. I tried to ruin you. Why are you here? Amanda sat on the edge of the bed. She took his hand. Her skin was warm. Because I remember the man you were before the sickness took hold, she said softly. I remember the man who taught me how to drive in the rain. The man who built a company from a garage because he wanted to change the world. That man is still in there, Liam. He's just buried under the noise. I broke us, Amanda. I broke everything. The disease broke us, Liam. You were sick. You didn't know, but I was cruel, Liam insisted. That wasn't the disease. That was me. The arrogance. That was me, maybe, Amanda admitted. But arrogance is just fear wearing a mask. And you were terrified. You knew something was wrong with your mind, even if you couldn't name it. You pushed me away because you were scared I'd see the cracks. She squeezed his hand. The drug. The one Stratosphere developed. It works, Liam. The FDA just fast-tracked it for compassionate use. We can start the treatment tomorrow. It won't give you back the last 7 years. It won't fix your company. But it will stop the degeneration. You can have your mind back. Liam looked at the ceiling. He thought about his empire. The glass towers. The awards. The billions. It was all ash now. He looked at Amanda. I don't deserve it, he said. Probably not, Amanda smiled, a sad, sweet smile. But I didn't build it for the man who deserved it. I built it for the man I loved. She stood up and kissed his forehead. Rest, Liam. The war is over. You lost. And it's the best thing that could have happened. To you, she walked to the window and opened the blinds. The sun was rising over Seattle. It wasn't the cold, grey rain of the night he kicked her out. It was bright, piercing. Liam watched the light hit her hair. He realized then that he had spent his life trying to own the light, to capture it in fiber optics and screens. But he had never understood it. Amanda was the light, and she had come back to the darkness to find him. Amanda, she turned. When do we start? Tomorrow, she said. Tomorrow we start over. Recovery didn't happen in a montage. There was no inspirational music. There was only the grinding, humiliating reality of rewiring a brain that had spent 7 years eating itself alive. For the first 3 months, Liam Sterling, the man who had once coded an operating system in a weekend, couldn't tie his own shoelaces. The neurological treatment Amanda's team had developed, Project Lazarus, was aggressive. It halted the degeneration, but the damage the disease had already done required a complete reboot of his motor functions and emotional regulation. He spent his days in a private rehabilitation clinic on the outskirts of Seattle, surrounded by pine trees and silence. He hated the silence. In the silence, he could hear the echoes of his own cruelty. He remembered the look on Amanda's face at the gala. He remembered the accusation. Baby killer. The words tasted like ash in his mouth every morning. He wasn't visited by the press. The media had moved on, as they always do. The headlines had shifted from the fall of Sterling to the next big scandal. He was yesterday's news. A cautionary tale told in business schools about burnout and hubris. He was visited, however, by 2 people. Greg came on Tuesdays. He brought paperwork, mostly. The dismantling of Sterling systems was a complex legal autopsy. The SEC is dropping the fraud charges, Greg said one rainy afternoon, placing a thick stack of documents on the table. Mostly because Amanda's lawyers threatened to tie them up in litigation until the sun burns out. But you're banned from holding a C-suite position in a publicly traded company for 10 years. Liam stared at his hands. They were trembling less today. So I'm exiled. You're retired, Liam, Greg corrected him, his tone softer than usual. You have the trust fund Amanda set up. You have the house in Queen Anne. You survived. Take the win, did I? Liam looked up, his eyes hollow. I don't feel like a winner, Greg. I feel like a ghost haunting my own life. Better a ghost than a corpse, Greg said, standing up. She saved you, Liam. Don't waste it feeling sorry for yourself. Amanda came on Sundays. She never talked about business. She never talked about Stratosphere or the billions she was making or the magazine covers she was gracing. She came, wearing jeans and oversized sweaters, her hair in a messy bun, looking like the math teacher he had fallen in love with a decade ago. She brought food, homemade lasagna, fresh sourdough bread, things that smelled like a home he hadn't stepped foot in for years. They didn't talk much at first. She would sit by the window and read while he did his cognitive exercises, simple puzzles meant for children. It was humiliating, but her presence took the edge off the shame. She didn't look at him with pity. She looked at him with patience. It was 6 months before he finally asked the question that had been burning a hole in his chest. Why, it was a Sunday in November. The rain was lashing against the glass. Amanda looked up from her book. "Why what? Why are you doing this?" Liam's voice was raspy. "I threw you out. I humiliated you. I hired a fixer to destroy your reputation. I accused you of killing a child we never had. Any other woman would have let me rot. Most would have pushed me off the ledge themselves." Amanda closed her book. She looked out at the rain for a long time before answering. "Do you remember our third date, Liam?" Liam frowned, the memory hazy through the fog of the last few years. "Other. The coffee shop, no. The pier," Amanda said softly. "It was raining just like this. We were eating cheap fish and chips." A homeless man collapsed near the railing. Everyone walked past him. Everyone. "But you didn't," Liam blinked. A flicker of a memory surfaced. The smell of salt and grease. The wet pavement. "You took off your jacket," Amanda continued, her eyes locking onto his. "It was a cashmere coat you couldn't really afford back then. You put it over him. You called the ambulance. You waited with him in the rain for 20 minutes, holding his hand because he was scared. You ruined your coat and you missed your meeting with the investors." Liam looked down. "I don't remember that." "I do," Amanda said firmly. "I remember that man. That's the man I married. That's the man who was hiding under the sickness and the ego and the money. The disease stole him, Liam. It turned you into something else. But I knew he was still in there. I built Stratosphere to buy him back." She stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I didn't save the billionaire, Liam. I saved the guy who gave his coat to a stranger. The return release day came a year after the diagnosis. Liam didn't go back to the penthouse. He couldn't bear the glass walls and the cold marble. He sold it. Every penny from the sale went to a charity for neurological research. Instead, he moved into the small, cedar-shingled house in Queen Anne that Amanda had bought for him. It was cozy, filled with books and soft light. It was a place for a human being, not a titan of industry. But the transition was harder than the hospital. In the hospital, he had a schedule. In the real world, he had a void. He was 39 years old. He had no job, no company, no reputation. The silence of the house was deafening. He found himself pacing the living room at 3:00 a.m., his mind racing with code he wasn't allowed to write, ideas he had no team to execute. He was standing in the kitchen one morning, staring at a bag of flour, when Amanda walked in. She had a key. She used it sparingly, but today she looked purposeful. "You're pacing again," she noted, setting her purse on the counter. "Greg says you're calling him at odd hours with ideas for startups." "I'm bored, Amanda," Liam admitted, leaning against the counter. "My brain is healing, but now it's just spinning. I need to build something. It's who I am. I can't just sit here and watch the rain." Then build something, Amanda said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a heavy, leather-bound notebook. She slid it across the island. "What is this?" "A business plan," she said. "But not for software. Not for tech. No algorithms. No shareholders." Liam opened the book. It wasn't typed. It was handwritten in Amanda's elegant script. The first page read, "The baker's algorithm." He looked up, confused. "A bakery? You used to talk about it," Amanda said, a small smile playing on her lips. "In college. Before the venture capital, before the stress. You used to say that coding was stressful because you could never touch it. You said you wanted to make something you could hold. Something that smelled good. That was a fantasy," Liam scoffed. "I don't know the first thing about baking." "No," Amanda corrected him. "You don't know the chemistry of baking. But you understand systems. You understand variables. Flour, water, yeast, time, temperature. It's just an algorithm, Liam. But the output isn't data. It's bread." She walked around the counter and stood in front of him. The distance between them was small, but it felt like a canyon they were slowly building a bridge across. "You need to work with your hands, Liam. You need to ground yourself. If you go back to tech, the stress will trigger a relapse." The doctors were clear. "But this is creation without the destruction." Liam looked at the notebook, then at Amanda. She was the CAO of a multi-billion-dollar company. She spent her days negotiating with governments and managing thousands of employees. And yet here she was, trying to give him a purpose that wouldn't kill him. "And you?" Liam asked, his voice low. "Where do you fit into this? You're the queen of Silicon Valley now. You're going to London next week." "I postponed London," Amanda said quietly. Liam froze. "Why?" "Because there's a silence in my house too," she admitted. She looked vulnerable for the first time in years. "I spent 7 years fighting a war, Liam. I won. I have the empire. I have the power. And I come home to an empty room and a cold dinner." She took a breath, her hazel eyes searching his face. "I missed my friend. I missed the man who likes his coffee black with 2 ice cubes. I miss the partner who challenges me." "I'm not that partner anymore," Liam said, the self-hatred bubbling up. "I'm a broken version of him." "We are both broken," Amanda said fiercely. "I have scars too, Liam. You gave them to me. And I'm still angry. Some days I'm furious. I look at you and I remember the night you kicked me out and I want to scream." "You should," Liam whispered. But then she stepped closer, her hand brushing his arm. "I remember that forgiveness isn't a feeling. It's a choice. It's an architectural decision. You decide to build a bridge instead of a wall. I'm choosing to build the bridge, Liam. But I need you to walk halfway." Liam looked at her hand on his arm. It was a lifeline. He thought about the code he had written that changed the world. He thought about the billions he had made and lost. None of it felt as heavy or as important as the notebook sitting on the counter. He placed his hand over hers. "I don't know if I can do it," he said honestly. "I don't know if I can be the man you deserve." "You don't have to be the man I deserve," Amanda said. "Just be the man who stays." "Be the man who tries," Liam nodded. He picked up the notebook. "The baker's algorithm." "Okay," he said. "But if we do this, I handle the logistics. You handle the quality control. I remember your sourdough. It was dense," Amanda laughed. It was a genuine, bright sound that filled the empty kitchen. "Excuse me. My sourdough was legendary, legendarily heavy," Liam teased, a spark of his old wit returning, but without the bite. "We're going to need better yeast strains. I'll research the fermentation variables." "There he is," Amanda smiled, touching his cheek. "There's the nerd I married." The conclusion 6 months later, the baker's algorithm opened on a quiet corner in Queen Anne. There was no press release. There was no launch party. Just a sign in the window and the smell of fresh bread drifting down the street. Liam Sterling stood behind the counter, covered in flour, wearing an apron that said head engineer. He looked tired, his muscles ached, and he had been up since 4:00 a.m. kneading dough. He had never been happier. The bell above the door jingled. Amanda walked in. She was wearing a suit. She had a board meeting in an hour, but she stopped to grab a coffee. "How's the yield?" she asked, leaning over the counter. "Efficiency is up 12%, Liam reported, sliding a cup of black coffee with 2 ice cubes across to her. "But the customer satisfaction index is the real metric. Mrs. Higgins says the baguette reminds her of Paris." "High praise," Amanda grinned, taking a sip. She looked at him. Really looked at him. The tension in his jaw was gone. The manic glint in his eyes had been replaced by a calm, steady light. He wasn't the master of the universe anymore. He was just a man making bread. And he was whole. "I have to fly to Tokyo tonight," Amanda said, checking her watch. "I'll be gone for 3 days. I'll be here," Liam said. "Waiting, I know," Amanda said. She reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. "That's all I ever wanted." She turned and walked out the door, back into the world of high stakes and power. Liam watched her go, then turned back to his oven. The timer was beeping. The bread was rising. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke, and a single shaft of sunlight hit the pavement, illuminating the path forward. It wasn't a path of gold. It was simple concrete, wet and clean. And for the first time in his life, Liam Sterling was content to just walk it, one step at a time. And that is the story of Liam and Amanda. It's a brutal reminder that sometimes the things we think are destroying us are actually the only things holding us together. Liam spent 7 years building a fortress of money and power, only to realize his foundation, his marriage, was the strongest part of his life, and he had taken a sledgehammer to it. This story isn't just about corporate revenge, it's about the danger of assumptions. Liam assumed Amanda was weak. He assumed she was unfaithful. He assumed his success was his own. Those assumptions cost him 7 years of happiness. But Amanda, she proved that true power isn't about shouting the loudest or having the biggest bank account. It's about resilience, truth, and the incredible strength it takes to forgive the unforgivable. If you enjoyed this story of redemption, ruin, and second chances, please hit that like button. It helps the channel immensely. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Question for the comments: if you were Amanda, would you have saved Liam after everything he did to you? Or would you have let him fall? Let me know your thoughts down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.